Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So finally, about a week ago, I saw Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now this is not going to be a review of the movie, but I am sort of reviewing some of the, angry tweets and angry comments and rants from people on YouTube and as well as Twitter, not to mention Facebook. Some people that I know, some that I don't. These are not necessarily movie critics, just people that watch the movie, but were really disappointed about this film. In fact, some of them consider it the worst Star Wars film ever, which is really amazing because back in 1999, The Phantom Menace, Episode 1, was considered the worst. So, let's discuss some of the things that people had issues with. Now, let me make this clear that the issues that the Star Wars fans and other people that watch our films, but in particular Star Wars fans, the issues they have are not issues of bad screenwriting. They are issues that evolve from this idea that whatever The Force Awakens set up 2 years ago, of course being Episode 7, that came out exactly 2 years ago, December of 2015, is not what they envisioned in their minds in the last 2 years. Because there have been all sorts of theories about certain characters. What happens to Luke Skywalker? Is he going to train Rey? Who are Rey's parents? Who is really Snoke? Is Snoke somehow related to Rey? I mean, the list goes on. So, this movie The Last Jedi did not seem to deliver based on what they envisioned happened. Because of course they were not involved in the production of The Last Jedi, the screenwriting, pre-production, etc. So since they have no real say in anything that happens, director Rian Johnson and the writer of the film as well, in fact the sole writer of Star Wars The Last Jedi, had his own ideas. And Disney decided to buy into it and went with it. So, but let's talk about things that they seem to have issues with, and that is the humor. The humor which is... the film is tacitly humorous. In other words, the humor evolves from the situations, and they don't feel out of left field, because Star Wars has always... the movies always had some elements of humor. Then there's slapstick humor, like Jar Jar Binks in The Phantom Menace. Humor has always been a strong element, and so anyway... Luke Skywalker on the planet of Atchu, at one point in the movie, he drinks milk from one of these creatures, and he pinches their nipples and drinks green milk, and that's how he gets by on this island. There are creatures on this island, including the porgs. And he catches fish. And so, how's this a problem exactly? I mean, first of all, eating and drinking in Star Wars is very unusual to see. We don't really see many characters engage in that sort of activity, if you want to call it drinking and eating. I think that there was a dinner scene between Padme and Anakin Skywalker in Attack of the Clones. Of course, Luke Skywalker in A New Hope drinks, I think it's a milk beverage. But then the cantina from A New Hope, where you see some of the scum and villainy engaged in drinking and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, you don't see a whole lot of it. So the fact that he's drinking green milk, it didn't bother me. I mean, it showed how he's getting by. I think that's okay, and it was sort of funny. And he makes this sort of gesture at Rey, like, good stuff, So, throwing the lightsaber. So, Rey meets Luke, and that was a setup from The Force Awakens, and in this movie, The Last Jedi, they meet, and he gets the lightsaber, he looks at it, and he throws it over his shoulder, and I thought it was sort of in keeping with the character. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's a hermit, lives on an island with a bunch of creatures, has no connection to the Force anymore, despite being a Jedi Master. And he wants to do away with the past. He doesn't want to be connected to the past anymore. after the whole debacle of the Jedi Temple that burned down to the ground, and Kylo Ren being one of his top students, turning to the dark side, and of course, Kylo Ren being Darth Vader's grandson. And he turned to the dark side, and of course there were a couple moments in the movie where he gets the lightsaber and is ready to kill Kylo Ren. So, those are the flashbacks, which is also unusual in Star Wars. You almost never see that. So, again, what was the issue of him throwing the lightsaber? Okay, so he doesn't have his own lightsaber. He's not engaged in the Force anymore. He's a hermit. Not unlike Obi-Wan Kenobi, played by Alec Guinness in A New Hope, who did have a lightsaber. Anakin's lightsaber, no less. The same lightsaber that he tosses over his shoulder. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He's a totally different character than Obi-Wan. It's not the same character. And of course, he has changed. He's evolved. Luke is not the same Luke from before. So we're talking about a 30-year span where people do change. This guy is living on an island, for goodness sakes, with lactating creatures and porgs and, his servants, who are these creatures that, I guess serve him food or whatever. Whatever the case may be, keep his house tidy. And he plans to die there, on that island. Now, that's not the Luke Skywalker you wanted to see in Last Jedi. What was the Luke that you wanted to see? You wanted to see the hero from Return of the Jedi. The guy that could wield a lightsaber like no one's business. Sure, but that's not the same character anymore. In 30 years, people change. It just happens. Han Solo as the smuggler, Han Solo the smuggler, who was a General Solo, I believe, back in Return of the Jedi, and 30 years later, he's still a smuggler. But, Han is, there are complications. He has a son, and that's Kylo Ren, so you know that story. I didn't think it was out of left field throwing the lightsaber. Now, the other issue people had was Poe Dameron, who is ready to confront and do some damage to some of these Imperial cruisers, and we'll call them Imperial cruisers for now. There's a different name for them. And he's on the transmitter talking to General Hux. And he pretends like he can't hear General Hux. General Hux, are you there? Are you there? Now, for me, Poe is not unlike Han Solo. He is rebellious. He does his own thing. And sometimes they both seem to dress similarly. So, Han Solo also, in A New Hope, which we seem to keep bringing up here as far as comparisons are concerned, also had a moment of humor, if you remember, where they're inside the Death Star, and there's an alert, and he answers this transmission, and he says, everything's okay, everything's under control, situation normal, and then everything's fine, largely very dangerous. How are you? And so it was humor, it was needed. Star Wars is always about the humor, the last-minute escapes, the edge-of-your-seat adventure set in a galaxy far, far away. That's really what Star Wars is supposed to be. The deeper philosophical aspects of Star Wars have to do with the Force, which this movie got a hold of very well, and Force Awakens was leading into. Again, I don't know what movie you're expecting. One thing I would like is a Poe Dameron movie. I think with this actor playing Poe, that's more interesting than a new Han Solo flick. So anyway, the humor is still there. It's used sporadically to punctuate certain moments, because that's what you need. There's tension. There's tension between Kylo Ren and Rey, tension between Luke Skywalker and Rey, the tension between Snoke and Kylo Ren. All of these situations are set up very well, and you call this bad screenwriting because you inject some moments of humor that you think are the equivalent of John Waters? No, come on. What movie are you watching? Luke teasing Rey about the Force. Again, that made sense. He was reconnecting with the Force, and Luke finally does. He turns out to be really quite the most powerful Jedi Master ever. So yeah, there's a little humor associated with that. Not unlike Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, when he's sort of, trying to levitate Yoda and R2-D2 and use the Force. And then when Yoda falls, the gesture that Yoda makes, and Yoda has a lot of humor in The Empire Strikes Back as well, and serious when he needs to be, was funny. So, and The Empire Strikes Back is mostly a solemn film. I mean, there's a lot of solemnity attached to it. It's a dark middle chapter, not unlike The Last Jedi. So therefore, since this is the middle chapter, it makes sense that the middle chapters are always a little bit darker, a little out there, but still in keeping with the ideas, the elements of Star Wars. Whether you believe it or not, they are there. The Casino City in the planet Canto Bight. I have no problem with it. In fact, it's a short piece of the plot that's dedicated to that, because the whole idea is to find, for Finn and Rose, to find a guy that can disable the tracking device, that somehow when you go into light speed, is that for the enemy not to be able to track them during light speed. I thought that was a nice novel touch. And it's very brief, and it's not unlike the cantina that you see in A New Hope. There are some exotic creatures, and it's a casino. I mean, why not? I don't understand how that has no place in Star Wars. But the cantina does, which has a bunch of strange creatures. And then there's the band performing their little do-do-do-do-do-do. I mean, come on. So, and last but not least, I want to discuss very briefly the Force projection in the movie that they found very controversial. I did not. Be honest with you, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it a little bit, but basically Luke Skywalker, rather than going in person to meet Kylo Ren and get into a lightsaber duel, which many would expect would have happened, particularly, when you see the prequels, there are a lot of lightsaber duels, and this new trilogy has a lot less of them, which is not a bad thing. So, he does a Force projection. In other words, he sort of does his whole Zen thing, where he projects himself as a younger Luke Skywalker that Kylo Ren can recognize. And he reconnects with Leia, and reconnects with C-3PO very briefly, doing a little wink. But basically, it was a way of showing Kylo Ren, hey, I am the Jedi Master, not you. You still have a lot to learn. That's kind of what I took away from it. And the fact that, yes, he does somehow sacrifice himself and dies. I don't really see the issue, because Obi-Wan Kenobi did the exact same thing. There he is fighting Darth Vader. He might have been able to destroy Darth Vader, and instead he allows himself to be killed by Darth Vader. Now, apparently that was never a point of contention with anybody back in the day with A New Hope, but somehow it is with Luke, and I guess because it's Luke Skywalker, we want him to live and breathe and be a hero. And he doesn't do that, but he does save the few remaining members of the Resistance, who used to be the rebels back in the day. So, I had no issue with that. I think it's a first for the Star Wars universe to have a character actually project themselves rather in any other planet, but not actually be there. And that I thought was it was fascinating. It was different. It goes to show that we don't know that much about the Force yet. Still a mystery. So there you go. These are not elements of bad screenwriting. Again, I think bad screenwriting is when you have characters, particularly in a good and evil plot like this, where you don't develop the tension. The tension is developed, once again, between Rey and Kylo Ren. They see each other through a Force transmission signal. Kind of interesting. And Poe going against some of the Resistance members by doing his own thing and wanting to blow up ships from the enemy. And the tension between Snoke and Kylo Ren. I mean, there's a little bit of everything here. It's all character-based. This is not just... Star Wars has never been, to me, with the exception maybe, The Phantom Menace to some degree, it's never been a whole lot of special effects thrown at you, and, that's it. It's Star Wars is always meant to be an update of the Flash Gordon serials from back in the day, or Buck Rogers, and elevated, and with philosophy. And that's kind of what I take away from it. And this whole idea of passing down from one generation to the next. Out with the old, in with the new. There was, and I will leave it with this one note, there was this guy on YouTube who mentioned that because that is the case with The Last Jedi, and he thought it was a good film, he rated it a little bit higher than the first screening. He realized Star Wars nowadays, the new movies, they're not for the Star Wars fans like myself who grew up watching Star Wars since 1977. Not 1980s on video, that doesn't count. Since the theatrical screenings of 1977, 1980, 83, and then later on with the prequels. Because it's not going to be about the Skywalkers anymore. It won't be a Skywalker saga. And I'm curious to know what's going to happen with Carrie Fisher. That's a big if. What's going to happen now? Because obviously she passed away a year ago, and I don't know. Princess, or General Leia, I should say, survives in this movie. So what are they going to do for Episode 9? Good question. But believe you me, those who are complaining about things, from what I've gathered so far, that have nothing to do with the screenplay. It's about moments that they feel are out of whack with Star Wars, and they are not. I gave you the examples. If you think the humor still doesn't work, that's fine. That's your, if it falls flat, whatever. But it's still in keeping with Star Wars. To me, it has the spirit of Star Wars, the energy of Star Wars. It's everything you want Star Wars to be, I thought. It outclasses the prequel trilogy, which I didn't hate. Many people did hate those. But this whole thing about, putting your head down in shame, like, oh my goodness, Star Wars, what's going on? Disney, you're ruining it. You people have memory loss, I should say. It's really memory loss when you think back to the prequels. They were also people putting their heads down in shame, like, oh my God, what did George Lucas do? So then you return to the flavor, the spirit, the connection to the Force, and come up with new ideas. And you're not happy because these are not the theories that you thought you had in mind when you watched The Force Awakens. So anyway, I'll do a separate video on Rey's parents, which is going to be very brief, and why I thought it was essential to go in that direction. So that will be a separate video. So anyway, this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Lend me your complaints and whatever you agree with or disagree with about what I said. But this is coming also from a Star Wars fan who did like The Last Jedi a lot. So that's just me. Please subscribe. And until then, this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.